They thought the hidden camera was just the petty jealousy of a neglected wife trying to catch a cheating husband. But what I captured in the darkness of our walk-in closet was not just moans or betrayal, it was the detailed blueprint for my death. My husband and the woman next door were not just sharing a bed. They were orchestrating a $50 million fraud designed to erase my freedom, my reputation, and my life. My name is Mallory Vance, and for the last 10 years, I have been the invisible spine of Vantage Systems. The world sees my husband, Carter, as the visionary genius who revolutionized smart home technology. They see his teeth, capped to perfection, and his suits, tailored to hide the softness of a man who has never lifted anything heavier than a champagne flute. They do not see me in the basement, writing the code that keeps their houses from burning down, or designing the load-bearing walls that keep their roofs from collapsing. I was the structural engineer, the architect, the brain. Carter was just the mouth. We lived in Silverleaf Estates, a sprawling collection of McMansions where the grass is cut to the exact same millimeter and the neighbors are cut from the exact same cloth. It was a suffocating paradise. Everyone wore a mask here, but none fit quite as snugly as the one worn by Valerie. She lived directly across the manicured hedge, a tragic, beautiful widow who baked cinnamon rolls that tasted like cardboard and smiled with too many teeth. She was always there, waving from her porch, her eyes scanning our property like a radar dish. I was packing for a trip to Chicago. It was a standard site assessment for a high-rise project, scheduled to take exactly 7 days. But the air in our master bedroom felt thin. Carter was not helping me pack. He was pacing. He checked his watch 3 times in 5 minutes. He was too eager, too helpful, trying to herd me out the door like an unwanted guest in my own home. "You're going to be late for your flight." "Mal," he said, his voice tight. "Traffic is a nightmare on the interstate." I ignored him and walked toward the walk-in closet to grab my scarf. I punched in the 6-digit code on the keypad. The light flashed red. Denied. I tried again. Denied. I turned to look at him. Carter froze mid-step. "Oh," he said, a nervous laugh escaping his throat. I forgot to tell you. I changed the code yesterday. Just a security update. The system was acting glitchy. Glitchy, I asked. I wrote the firmware for that lock. Carter, it doesn't glitch. Well, it did. He insisted, shifting his weight. I'll give you the new code when you get back. You don't need anything in there right now. Do you? Suspicion is a cold thing. It does not feel like fire. It feels like ice water running down your spine. I did not suspect lipstick on his collar. That would be too cliché for a man as narcissistic as Carter. I suspected greed. That closet housed the wall safe containing the proprietary blueprints for our next generation of sensors. I did not argue. I nodded, playing the role of the tired, submissive wife. But the moment he went downstairs to load the car, I acted. I did not need a key to get into a room I designed, but I needed something better than access. I reached into my travel bag and pulled out a prototype sensor I had been testing. To the naked eye, it looked exactly like a standard smoke detector battery cover. In reality, it was a wide-angle lens with a microphone sensitive enough to hear a whisper from across the room. I snapped it into place on the ceiling of the closet. It was a beautiful piece of engineering. It recorded in 4K resolution and uploaded real-time data to a private, encrypted server that only I could access. It bypassed the home Wi-Fi entirely, using a cellular uplink so Carter could not trace the traffic. Mal. "The Uber is here," Carter shouted from the foyer. I walked downstairs, my face a blank slate. He kissed my cheek, his lips dry and perfunctory. "Have a safe trip," he said. "Don't worry about anything here. I'll hold down the fort. I know you will." I replied. 6 hours later, I sat on the edge of a stiff hotel bed in Chicago. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and loneliness. I opened the Vantage Secure app on my phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a chaotic rhythm that defied all my logic. I did not want to be right. I wanted to be a paranoid woman who needed a vacation. I tapped the screen. The feed loaded. The interior of my closet appeared in high definition, bathed in the soft glow of the recessed lighting. The door opened. My breath hitched. Carter walked in, but he was not alone. Valerie followed him, and the look on her face was not one of a neighbor borrowing sugar. It was the look of a predator entering its den. "Finally," Valerie said, her voice crystal clear through my phone speaker. "I thought that bitch would never leave." I stared at the screen, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. The show was about to begin. I sat frozen on the edge of the hotel bed, the blue light of the phone screen illuminating the darkness of the room. The image was crisp, a testament to the lens I had engineered, but my mind was drifting back to a time when things were blurry and hopeful. I remembered the first time Carter looked at me. I was the scholarship student in the back of the lecture hall, wearing an oversized hoodie to hide my body and glasses that slid down my nose. I could calculate the load-bearing capacity of a suspension bridge in my head, but I could not order a coffee without stuttering. Carter was different. He was the golden boy with the dazzling smile and a C average who sat in the front row and charmed the professors into rounding up his grades. "You have the vision. Mal." He had told me over cheap pizza in our dorm room. "But the world doesn't listen to whispers. Let me be your voice. You build the future, and I'll make them buy it." It sounded like a partnership. It was actually a parasitic infection. I thought about the early days of Vantage systems. I spent 18 hours a day in a drafty garage, my fingers cramping from typing code and my eyes burning from soldering circuit boards. I lived on caffeine and ambition. Carter spent those days at the country club. He claimed he was networking, building relationships, securing capital. He would come home smelling of gin and expensive cologne, pat me on the head like a faithful dog, and tell me to keep working. Slowly, methodically, he erased me. First, he suggested I skip the board meetings because I was too technical for the investors. Then he removed my name from the website, claiming it looked better to have a single strong leader. I went from co-founder to technical advisor, and finally, just the supportive wife who stayed home. I let it happen. I trusted him. I thought we were a team. My eyes snapped back to the present, focusing on the small screen in my hand. The feed from the closet was live. Carter and Valerie stumbled into the frame. They were laughing, a cruel, sharp sound that the high-fidelity microphone picked up clearly. They fell against the shelves I had installed, knocking over a stack of my old sketchbooks. They did not care. Their intimacy was not passionate. It was possessive. It was the celebration of thieves who had just pulled off a heist. After the physical act was over, the real betrayal began. They did not whisper sweet nothings. They stood by the open wall safe, the one Carter had changed the code for. "Did you get the files for Project Obsidian?" Valerie asked, buttoning her blouse with a casual efficiency that made my stomach turn. "They are all here," Carter replied, pulling a hard drive from the safe. Every schematic, every structural weakness she identified and then fixed. Except, we aren't going to fix them this time. I frowned at the screen. Valerie was not just the lonely widow next door. The way she held herself, the way she spoke about permits and regulations, it all clicked. She was a lobbyist. I had seen her name on donor lists for the city council, but I never made the connection. She was a professional manipulator, the kind who greased palms to make safety regulations disappear. "The council vote is set for Tuesday," Valerie said, her voice dropping lower. "I have 3 members in my pocket. Once the restrictions are lifted, we can swap the materials." But Carter, what about her? She's going to notice the concrete density is off. She checks everything. Carter turned to look at the camera, unaware he was staring right into my eyes across hundreds of miles. He smirked, a look of pure malice that I had never seen before. "Mallory is a tool that has outlived its usefulness," Carter said coldly. "I never loved her. Val, I needed a brain to build the empire. Now that I have the blueprints, I don't need the architect anymore. Besides, who is going to believe a hysterical, depressed housewife over the CEO of Vantage Systems?" My blood turned to ice. He was not just cheating on me. He was planning to destroy me. Are we sure about the timing? Valeri asked, a hint of hesitation in her voice. If the detonation happens too early. It won't, Carter interrupted. It will look like a tragic accident during the stress test. And poor Mallory. She'll be the engineer who signed off on the faulty design. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. But I refused to let them fall. I watched as the man I had given 10 years of my life to outlined the end of my existence. He did not see a wife. He saw a liability. I can't wait to be rid of her, Carter muttered, reaching for Valeri again. Living with her is like living with a calculator. No soul, just numbers. I closed the app, my hands trembling. He was right about one thing. I was good with numbers. And as I sat there in the dark hotel room, I began to calculate the variables of my revenge. The probability of his survival just dropped to 0. I sat in the darkness of the hotel room and pressed the rewind button on my phone screen. I needed to hear it again. I needed to dissect their betrayal with the same precision I used to analyze structural load paths. I maximized the volume and activated the audio enhancement filter I had coded into the app. The whispers near the safe transformed into clear, jagged shards of sound that cut through the silence of my room. $50 million, Carter whispered, the greed dripping from his voice like oil. It is already sitting in the Cayman accounts. The swap is done. The luxury condos are wrapped in cheap polyethylene cladding, not the fire-resistant panels we quoted in the original specs. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. Polyethylene was highly flammable. He was not just stealing money, he was turning a residential tower into a potential Roman candle. He was risking hundreds of lives for a payday. And the authorization Valerie asked, her voice sharp and businesslike. If the inspectors look too closely at the procurement logs, they won't look past the signature. Carter laughed, a low, rumbling sound that made my skin crawl. Signed, sealed, and delivered by the chief engineer herself. I used her digital signature to approve the material change orders 3 weeks ago. She never checks the archives. She trusts me. By the time anyone notices the discrepancy, the building will be finished. We need a narrative. Carter, Valerie said, leaning against the safe. Just a signature isn't enough. If she fights back, if she denies it, she won't be credible. Carter interrupted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. I have already planted the seeds. I told the board she has been depressed since her mother passed. I told them she is erratic. I slipped those sedatives into her purse last week. Remember. When the investigation starts, they will find a woman popping pills, making sloppy mistakes in a drug-induced haze. We call it a mental breakdown. I watched the screen, my breath shallow. They had scripted my destruction. Valerie nodded, seemingly satisfied with the cruelty of the plan, and the incident she asked, next Saturday. The gala opening. Carter replied, We will stage a small electrical short in the demo unit. Just enough to ignite the cladding. When the forensic team sees how fast it burns, they will trace the approval back to Mallory. She goes to prison for criminal negligence and manslaughter if anyone gets unlucky. And I play the devastated husband who had no idea his brilliant wife had lost her mind. I stopped the video. The room was silent, but my head was screaming. I waited for the tears to come. I waited for the heartbreak to cripple me, but nothing happened. The tears did not come. Instead, a cold metallic calm settled over me. Crying was for the weak, for the woman Carter thought I was. The engineer in me took over. I was looking at a catastrophic structural failure, but this time, the structure was my life. When a beam cracks, you do not weep over the wood. You reinforce the surrounding architecture and excise the rot. I pulled my laptop from my bag. My hands were steady. I connected my phone and initiated a triple redundancy backup. One copy went to a physical drive I kept hidden in the hollow heel of my boot. One went to a server in Switzerland. The third went to a hidden partition on the Vantage Systems mainframe. a ghost drive I used for penetration testing years ago. They thought they were erasing me, but they were only creating data points that would lead to their execution. My thumb hovered over the airline app on my phone. The urge to fly home and scream in his face was primal. I wanted to tear down the house around them. But rage is a sloppy architect. If I went back now, I would be the hysterical wife they described. I would be playing my part in their script perfectly. No, I whispered to the empty room. I will not give you that satisfaction. I set the phone down. I would stay in Chicago. I would attend every meeting, shake every hand, and sign every document with a smile. I would build a fortress of an alibi so impenetrable that when their world caught fire, I would be the only one left standing in the cool, safe air. I would let them think they had won, right up until the moment the floor dropped out from under them. When I returned to Silverleaf Estates after 1 week, the performance resumed the moment my Uber pulled into the driveway. Carter was waiting on the porch, holding a bouquet of 24 red roses that cost more than my first car. Across the manicured hedge, Valerie was watering her hydrangeas. She looked up, beaming a smile so bright it could have powered the entire neighborhood grid, and waved frantically. I waved back, plastering a look of exhausted delight on my face, while inside, my stomach churned with a mixture of bile and hatred. "Welcome home, darling," Carter said, pulling me into a hug that felt like being squeezed by a python. God, the house was so empty without you. "I missed you too," I lied, burying my face in his shoulder to hide the coldness in my eyes. For the next 3 days, I played the role of the loving wife perfectly. I cooked dinner. I listened to his stories about golf. But the real work began after midnight, when Carter's breathing deepened into the rhythmic snore of the self-satisfied. While he slept, dreaming of his stolen millions, I sat in the guest room with my laptop, fighting a war he did not even know had started. Carter thought he owned Vantage Systems because his name was on the letterhead, but he did not understand the code. He did not know that 7 years ago, I had built a backdoor into the kernel of the company's operating system, a master key designed for emergency debugging that bypassed every security protocol, including his CEO clearance. I logged in. The screen washed my face in a pale blue glow. It took me less than 20 minutes to find the digital paper trail. I pulled up the change orders for the high-rise project. There it was, a document authorizing the switch to the cheap, flammable cladding, stamped with my digital signature. To an auditor, it looked airtight. But I dug deeper. I queried the metadata of the upload. Carter was sloppy. He was arrogant, and arrogance makes people careless. The command to attach my signature did not come from my office computer or my secure laptop. It originated from an IP address that I traced in seconds. It was not a hacker in Russia or a proxy server in China. It was Valerie's iPad Pro, connected to her home Wi-Fi network right next door. I kept digging. I followed the money. The $50 million saved from the material swap had been funneled through a series of shell companies, but the final destination was a bank in the Cayman Islands under the name Obsidian Holdings. One quick search through the leaked offshore registry databases revealed the director of Obsidian Holdings, Valerie Jenkins. They were not just framing me, they were robbing the company blind and preparing to retire on a beach while I rotted in a cell. The next morning, the gaslighting began. I placed my car keys on the kitchen counter, just like I always did. When I came back from the bathroom, they were gone. "Have you seen my keys?" I asked, patting my pockets. Carter looked up from his coffee, his expression a mask of concern. "Mal, you left them in the refrigerator. Again. I found them behind the milk." He held them up. I knew I had not put them there. A week ago. I would have argued. Now. I put a hand to my forehead and let my shoulders slump. I don't know what's happening to me," I whispered, forcing a tremor into my voice. "My head feels so foggy lately." "Did you remember to take your pills this morning?" Carter asked, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Maybe we should up the dosage. You seem unstable." "Maybe you're right," I said. looking down at the floor. I feel like I'm losing my mind. He smirked behind his mug. He thought he was breaking me. He had no idea he was just reinforcing the trap I was building for him. That afternoon, while Carter was at the club, I drove to a diner 2 towns over. I sat in the back booth and waited. 10 minutes later, Elias Thorne walked in. He was 70 years old, wearing a tweed jacket that smelled of pipe tobacco and old law books. He had taught me intellectual property law at university, and he was the only man I trusted. I slid a flash drive across the table. Everything is on there. Elias, I said quietly. The video, the IP logs, the offshore accounts. Carter thinks he is writing a tragedy for me. I need you to help me rewrite the ending. Elias took the drive, his eyes hard and sharp behind his spectacles. If this is accurate, Mallory, we are not just looking at fraud, he said, his voice low and serious. We are looking at conspiracy to commit murder. But be careful. If they sense you know, they won't wait for the building to burn. They will come for you first. Let them come, I replied, staring at my cold coffee. I'm already ahead of them. The timeline for my destruction was accelerated on a Tuesday evening. Carter walked into the living room, loosening his tie with a sharp, jerky motion that betrayed his adrenaline. He poured himself a scotch, his hands moving a little too fast. Great news. Mal, he announced, though his eyes did not meet mine. The board wants to push the Skyline Heights Gala up. They want to capitalize on the market upswing. The launch is this Saturday. Saturday. 5 days. That was how much time I had left before he burned my reputation to the ground. I nodded, feigning a slow, medicated delay in my reaction. That's wonderful. Carter, I murmured. I hope I'm up for it. You will be, he said, taking a large gulp of his drink. You just need to rest. The next morning, Valerie appeared at the door. She was wearing a white sundress that made her look like an angel, holding a tin canister tied with a rustic ribbon. I heard you've been feeling a little off. Sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. I made you my special herbal blend. It's valerian root and chamomile. It works wonders for anxiety. I took the tin, my fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was cool, clammy. Thank you. Valerie, I said, you're such a good friend. The moment she left, I took the tea to the basement. I did not have a full chemical lab, but I had a mass spectrometer I used for testing material degradation in smart sensors. I ran a sample of the dried leaves. The results appeared on my monitor in bright red text. It was not just chamomile. It was laced with a synthetic psilocybin derivative. It was a hallucinogen. If I drank this, my pupils would dilate, my speech would slur, and any blood test administered after the accident would prove I was intoxicated. They were ensuring my testimony would be dismissed as the ramblings of a junkie. I poured the entire tin down the garbage disposal and turned on the tap. Then, I went to work on the house. I pulled up the admin console for the Vantage home system. Carter thought the smart speakers were just for playing music and checking the weather. I reconfigured the kernel. I turned every microphone in every room into an active listening device, bypassing the wake words. I routed the audio streams to a hidden partition on my server. The house was no longer a home. It was a wiretap. That evening, I set the trap. I lay on the living room sofa with a blanket pulled up to my chin, breathing in the deep, rhythmic pattern of deep sleep. Carter and Valerie came in from the patio. They thought I was out cold, sedated by her special tea. They stood in the kitchen, just 10 feet away. I could hear the clink of wine glasses. Look at her, Valerie sneered. She looks so peaceful. It's almost a shame she's going to wake up in a padded room. It's for the best, Carter replied, and I heard the refrigerator door open. Once the fire happens on Saturday, the police will demand a scapegoat. We hand them a drug-addled engineer who signed off on faulty materials. The judge will order mandatory psychiatric confinement. By the time she gets out, if she gets out, we will be living in Tuscany. What time is the trigger set for Valerie asked. 8:15, Carter said, right in the middle of my speech about safety protocols. Irony is a beautiful thing, isn't it? I kept my breathing steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 8:15. I had the time. I had the method. Later that night, I sat in the closet, the only place I felt truly safe, and called Elias via an encrypted line. I played him the audio recording from the kitchen. I have them. Elias, I whispered. I have them conspiring to frame me and commit arson. There was a long silence on the other end. It's powerful, Mallory. But it's circumstantial, Elias said, his voice heavy with caution. A defense attorney could argue they were joking, or that it's a deep-fake voice simulation. You designed the tech, so they will argue you manipulated the audio. To put Carter away for 20 years, we need more than talk. We need the actus reus. We need the criminal act. What are you saying? I asked, gripping the phone. I'm saying you can't stop the gala, Elias said. You have to let him go to that podium. You have to let him press the button to trigger the fire. Only when he executes the crime can we nail him for it. I hung up the phone. The air in the closet felt cold. I had to walk into a burning building, figuratively and literally. I had to stand on that stage and wait for my husband to try and kill me. Okay, Carter, I whispered to the empty room. You want a show, I'll give you a show. At 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, I slipped into the Skyline Heights construction site. The security guards were patrolling the perimeter, but I knew the blind spots in the motion sensors because I had drafted the schematic for their placement. I moved through the shadows of the unfinished atrium, the smell of curing concrete and sawdust filling my lungs. I was not there to stop the fire. I was there to ensure it did not burn long enough to hide their crimes. I located the central fire suppression manifold in the utility basement. Carter had access to the master control panel, allowing him to disable the sprinklers remotely during his demonstration. He thought he held the kill switch. He was wrong. I opened the service panel and hardwired a bypass loop into the logic board. I programmed the individual sprinkler heads to operate autonomously, triggered by heat sensors rather than the central server. I did not fix the flammable polyethylene cladding on the walls. That had to stay. It was the evidence of his negligence. But I ensured that the moment his staged spark turned into a flame, my system would drown it in chemical foam within 3 seconds, preserving the charred panels for the forensic investigators. Before I left, I accessed the on-site server and cloned the original project metadata. It proved that my initial designs specified fire-retardant aluminum composite, not the cheap plastic death trap Carter had installed. The timestamp showed exactly when my signature was forged to approve the swap. 2 nights later, the performance moved to our living room. Carter hosted a pre-launch cocktail party for a select group of investors and journalists. The house was filled with the smell of expensive cologne and the murmur of polite conversation. Carter stood by the fireplace, one hand resting theatrically on the mantel, the other gripping a glass of whiskey. It has been a challenging year, Carter said, his voice lowering to a somber, intimate pitch that drew the guests in. Mallory has been struggling. The pressure of the industry, the loss of her mother. It has taken a toll on her mental stability. I have tried to shield her, to take the burden of decision-making off her shoulders, but it is hard to watch the woman you love lose her grip on reality. The guests nodded sympathetically, casting pitying glances in my direction. I stood by the piano, wearing a cream silk dress, holding a glass of sparkling water. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. I simply smiled, a thin, fragile expression that played right into his narrative. Oh, Carter worries too much, I said softly. Stepping into the circle, I simply believe that the truth is like a structural crack in the foundation. You can paint over it, you can hide it behind drywall, but eventually, gravity always wins. The room went quiet. Carter's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Valerie appeared at my elbow. She was wearing a crimson gown that clashed violently with my pale silk. Mallory. Dear, you look flushed, Valerie said. her voice dripping with faux concern. "Here, let me top off your water." She reached across me with a glass of red wine in her other hand. It was a clumsy, deliberate move. She tipped her wrist, and the dark liquid cascaded down the front of my white dress, staining it like a fresh wound. "Oh my God," Valerie gasped, covering her mouth with a hand that held too much glee. "I am so clumsy, I am so sorry." "Mallory, it's fine," I said, my voice dead calm. "I will go change." I walked up the stairs, my back straight. This was part of the plan. I entered the master bedroom and went straight to the walk-in closet. I quickly changed into a fresh suit, but before I left, I tapped a command on my phone. The hidden camera in the ceiling blinked once, invisible to the naked eye. I routed the live stream directly to Elias Thorne's secure server. I left the closet door slightly ajar and exited the room. Minutes later, as I predicted, the two of them slipped away from the party. I watched the feed on my phone from the hallway. Carter and Valerie entered the closet, closing the door behind them. They thought they were safe in the soundproofed luxury I had designed. "Did you see her face?" Valerie laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. She looked like a drowned rat. "Focus. Val," Carter snapped. "Did the wire transfer clear 100%? Valerie replied. $50 million is sitting in the account in the Cayman Islands, and I have the plane tickets. One way to Rio, departing 3 hours after the gala ends. By the time the fire marshal realizes the suppression system failed because of Mallory's incompetence, we will be in the air." "Good," Carter said, exhaling sharply. "Just make sure you stick to the script. When the fire starts, you scream. I'll play the hero trying to save the prototype, and then we watch Mallory burn for it." I stood in the hallway, staring at the screen. They had just confessed to wire fraud, conspiracy to commit arson, and flight to avoid prosecution. And Elias had every single word. "Enjoy your flight," I whispered. "I hope you like prison food." The launch day was a spectacle of glass and steel. The Skyline Heights atrium was filled with the city's elite. The mayor was seated front and center, flanked by building inspectors and the hungry press corps. Standing center stage, bathed in the spotlight, was my husband. Carter looked the part of the visionary tycoon, his teeth gleaming as he waved to the crowd. He exuded confidence, but from where I stood, I could see the tension in his jaw. He was a man walking a tightrope, unaware that I had already cut the safety net. I stood in the shadows of the stage left wing. I was not wearing the drab, oversized clothes of the depressed housewife Carter had fabricated for his narrative. I was wearing a tailored white suit, sharp enough to cut glass, with 4-inch heels that clicked with authority against the floor. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and my makeup was flawless. I was not the victim he expected to see. I was the executioner. Safety is not just a feature. Carter bellowed into the microphone, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "It is a promise. At Vantage Systems, we believe that a home should be a fortress, a sanctuary." I spotted Valerie in the front row. She was clapping enthusiastically, her eyes locked on Carter with a predatory hunger. She looked like she was already spending the insurance money. She caught my eye in the wings, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She nudged the person next to her, but she quickly recovered, assuming I was there to witness my own public humiliation. "To demonstrate the resilience of our new design," Carter continued, checking his watch. "It was exactly 8:15. We have prepared a live test in the model unit behind me." He gestured to the glass-walled mock-up of a living room set up behind the podium. The walls were lined with the cheap, flammable cladding he had secretly installed. This was the moment. According to his script, a short circuit would ignite the wall. The sprinklers would fail due to my alleged design error. The fire would consume the room. And tomorrow, the headlines would blame my negligence. I saw his hand twitch in his pocket. He pressed the button on his phone. A sharp pop echoed through the atrium. A spark erupted from the electrical outlet in the model unit. It caught the drapes instantly, and the flames licked up the wall, feeding greedily on the polyethylene core of the panels. It was an aggressive, hungry fire. Carter took a step back, feigning shock, waiting for the inferno to grow out of control so he could play the devastated CEO. He waited for the failure. I waited for the physics. The temperature sensors I had recalibrated detected the spike in heat within milliseconds. They did not query the central server Carter controlled. They acted alone. The sound was like a whip crack. 6 high-pressure nozzles hidden in the ceiling of the model unit deployed simultaneously. They did not spray water. They blasted the room with a dense, fire-retardant chemical foam that I had personally selected for high-hazard industrial zones. 1 second. The flames were smothered. 2 seconds. The heat was neutralized. 3 seconds. The room was silent, coated in a layer of white foam that looked like snow. The fire was dead before it had taken its first breath. For a moment, there was total silence in the atrium. Carter stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, staring at the extinguished room. His script had just disintegrated. The fire was supposed to rage. The system was supposed to fail. Then, the applause started. "Bravo," the mayor shouted from the front row. The crowd erupted. They thought it was a demonstration of superior technology. They thought the rapid suppression was the intended outcome. Thunderous clapping filled the atrium. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. "Incredible," someone yelled. "Vantage Systems does it again." Carter looked like he was going to vomit. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a pale, trembling mess. He looked at the model unit. Then he looked at me in the wings. His eyes were wide with a dawn of horrific realization. He knew. He finally knew that the control he thought he had was an illusion. He stepped back toward the microphone, his hands shaking violently. I, he stammered, the microphone picking up his ragged breathing. That was exactly as planned. He tried to salvage the moment, but I was done letting him speak. I tapped the enter key on the tablet I was holding. Behind him, the massive LED screen that spanned the entire back wall of the stage flickered. The elegant Vantage Systems logo dissolved into static. The crowd's applause died down, replaced by confused murmurs. Carter turned around slowly, dread radiating from him in waves, to see what was happening. The screen went black for a heartbeat, and then a new image appeared. It was not a marketing video, nor was it anything salacious like a sex tape that would have been beneath me. Instead, the massive high-definition screen displayed something far more damning: the sterile, well-lit interior of our walk-in closet. A space designed for order, now serving as the backdrop for a felony. The audio system, designed to project music to the back of a crowded auditorium, now broadcasted the whispers of conspiracy with deafening clarity. Carter's voice boomed through the speakers, magnified to a godlike volume that shook the floorboards. "Just a few workers get slightly injured. We blame it all on that crazy Mallory and take the $50 million insurance." The silence that followed was heavy, instantaneous, and absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Valerie, standing in the front row, went rigid. The champagne flute in her hand slipped from her fingers and shattered on the concrete floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in a canyon. The mayor's jaw went slack. The investors, who moments ago were cheering, looked as though they had just swallowed broken glass. The screen did not stop there. It shifted from the video to a slideshow I had prepared with the meticulous care of a forensic accountant. It was not a chaotic dump of files. It was a presentation. First, the unauthorized change orders for the flammable cladding appeared, signed with a forged digital key. Next came the bank transfer receipts. Then, the flow of funds moving from Vantage Systems into the offshore accounts of Obsidian Holdings. And finally, the nail in the coffin, a photograph of the corporate registration for Obsidian Holdings, listing Valerie Jenkins as the sole beneficiary. It was a masterclass in corporate fraud, projected 30 feet high for the entire city to see. I walked out from the wings. The click of my heels was the only sound in the room. I approached Carter, who was standing frozen at the podium, his face the color of ash. He looked like a statue of a man who had died of fright. I reached out and gently took the microphone from his trembling hand. He did not resist. He could not move. I turned to the audience. I did not look angry. I did not look crazy. I looked like the CEO they should have hired 10 years ago. As you can see, I said, my voice calm, level, and terrifyingly cold. The Vantage system never fails. The sensors worked perfectly. The suppression system worked perfectly. The only failure here lies in the ethics of the operator. Carter flinched as if I had struck him. He looked out at the sea of faces, the reporters frantically typing on their phones, the investors whispering furiously to their lawyers, the mayor signaling for his security detail to extract him from the scandal. Then, a new sound cut through the murmurs. It started as a low wail in the distance but grew rapidly louder. Sirens. Lots of them. You can't do this, Carter stammered, his voice cracking as he tried to lean into the podium for support. This is a lie. He looked desperately at the cameras, sweat beading on his forehead. That video is fake, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. It's a deep fake. It's AI generated. She's a computer genius. She fabricated the whole thing to frame me because she's paranoid. I did not argue. I simply pressed a button on the clicker I held in my palm. The screen changed one last time. It displayed a side-by-side comparison, the timestamp of the video recording and the GPS data logs from Carter's own phone, which I had subpoenaed through the company's device management protocol. The metadata is immutable. Carter, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Your phone's GPS places you in that closet at the exact second that video was recorded, unless the AI also cloned your physical location and the unique MAC address of your device. You are done. I checked my watch. I sent the full evidence package to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission 2 hours ago. I informed him. They should be at the front gate right about now. Carter looked at the entrance of the construction site. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass walls of the atrium. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading, searching for the submissive wife he had tormented for years. But she was gone. I had buried her under the foundation of his failure. All that was left was the architect of his ruin. The police did not knock. They swarmed the atrium like a tactical strike force, their boots echoing on the polished concrete floor where the gala guests were still standing in stunned silence. The blue and red strobe lights from the patrol cars outside washed over the glass walls, turning the sophisticated launch party into a chaotic crime scene. Agents from the FBI moved with practiced efficiency, flanking the stage and blocking the exits. Carter was still gripping the podium, his knuckles white, when the first officer reached him. They did not ask him to step down. They yanked him away from the microphone, twisting his arms behind his back with a force that made him wince. Carter Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and embezzlement, the officer shouted, reciting the Miranda rights with a mechanical rhythm. Across the room, Valeri tried to blend into the crowd of terrified investors, but there was nowhere to hide. 2 officers intercepted her near the champagne fountain. The moment the handcuffs touched her wrists, the facade of the elegant, sweet neighbor disintegrated completely. She began to scream, a shrill, piercing sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't me. "Get your hands off me," Valerie shrieked, thrashing against the officer's grip. It was him. It was all Carter. He forced me. He made me sign those papers. I am a victim here. I didn't know he was going to hurt anyone. I watched from the center of the stage, my face impassive. She was throwing him to the wolves before they had even left the building. It was pathetic, but entirely predictable. Carter heard her betrayal. He looked up, his eyes wild and desperate, scanning the room until they locked onto mine. He did not look angry anymore. He looked small. He looked like the mediocre student who needed help with his homework. Mallory, he yelled, struggling against the officer who was shoving him toward the exit. "Tell them, Tell them it's a mistake, Mal. Baby, please. We are married. You can't let them take me. We can fix this. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no love, no hate. I looked at him the way a demolition expert looks at a condemned building moments before the plunger is pressed. The foundation was rotten. Carter, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. It had to come down. In the days that followed, the fallout was catastrophic for everyone but me. Vantage Systems stock plummeted, losing 90% of its value in 48 hours. The board of directors tried to salvage what was left, but I was faster. I activated the intellectual property protection clause in our original founding contract. It was a standard clause I had inserted 10 years ago, stating that if any executive officer used the technology for criminal purposes, all patent rights would revert solely to the primary inventor. Carter had never read it because he was too busy playing golf. I did not stop with Carter. I released the full dossier on Valerie. The emails I had decrypted proved she was not just a lobbyist, but a bagman for a massive corruption ring. She had been bribing city building inspectors to overlook safety violations for years. My evidence led to the immediate suspension and investigation of 5 senior city officials. The entire Department of Building Safety collapsed like a house of cards. The district attorney did not offer a plea deal, because Carter had rigged an occupied building to burn. The charges were elevated to the highest degree. He was facing 20 years in federal prison. My divorce lawyer filed the papers the morning after the arrest. With the video evidence of his adultery and the criminal charges, the prenuptial agreement that was supposed to leave me with nothing was declared null and void. I claimed everything. I took the liquid assets, the stock portfolio, and the rights to every single patent. A week later, I drove past our house in Silverleaf Estates. There was yellow police tape across the front door of Valerie's house. A foreclosure sign was already planted in her manicured lawn. My house, or rather, the house Carter had loved so much, was dark. The neighbors, the ones who used to look down on me as the quiet, weird wife, were standing on their porches. As my car passed, they did not wave. They stared at me with wide, fearful eyes. They realized that the quiet woman in the garden heard everything, saw everything, and forgot nothing. They were right to be afraid. 6 months is a long time in the world of technology, but it is barely a heartbeat when you are rebuilding a life. I stood in the corner office of the newly incorporated Vance Architecture, looking out over the skyline I was helping to reshape. The sign on the door no longer said Vantage Systems. That company was dead, buried under the weight of lawsuits and criminal investigations. When the bankruptcy auction was held, the banks were desperate to offload the assets. I bought back my own patents, my own code, and my own life's work for pennies on the dollar. My assistant knocked on the door and placed a single envelope on my desk before retreating. It was stamped with the seal of the state correctional facility. Carter. I picked up the letter opener, a heavy brass instrument that felt cool in my hand. I slit the envelope open and unfolded the cheap, rough paper. Carter's handwriting, once so arrogant and sweeping, was now cramped and shaky. Mal, please. The letter read, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But 20 years, I can't survive in here. The other inmates, they know I have money, or that I used to. Please, I just need enough for a retainer for an appeal lawyer. I am begging you. Remember the good times I read it twice. I searched for a flicker of empathy in my chest. I searched for that old reflex to fix his mistakes, to smooth over the rough edges of his incompetence. I found nothing. It was like looking for a pulse in a stone. I did not crumple the letter. That would have been emotional. Instead, I fed it into the crosscut shredder by my desk. The machine hummed efficiently, turning his desperate pleas into meaningless confetti. I turned back to my computer monitor. A local news segment was playing in a muted window. The headline read, Disgraced Lobbyist Begins Community Service. The camera zoomed in on a woman wearing an orange safety vest, picking up trash along the highway. It was Valerie. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was frizzy, her skin was pale, and the arrogance had been scrubbed off her face by the harsh reality of bankruptcy. She had sold everything to pay her legal fees, only to end up with a broom in her hand. That evening, I returned to the house in Silverleaf Estates. It was quiet now. The neighbors no longer gossiped. They respected the silence. I walked up the stairs to the master bedroom and entered the walk-in closet. This was where it had started. This was where I had discovered the plot to end my life. I walked over to the wall safe and punched in the new code. It opened with a smooth, heavy click. The shelves inside were no longer empty, nor were they filled with stolen ideas. They held the blueprints for my next project. It was a design for a new kind of urban housing, built with materials that were fireproof, earthquake-resistant, and transparent. I called it the Safe City Project. I looked up at the ceiling. The hidden camera was still there, disguised as a smoke detector. I had not taken it down. It was no longer a tool of surveillance. It was a reminder, a sentinel. I looked directly into the lens, knowing that the footage was being stored on a server that only I controlled. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached my eyes. "The system has been patched," I whispered. I closed the heavy steel door of the safe and spun the dial. The lock engaged with a finality that echoed through the room. I walked out of the closet and turned off the light, leaving the darkness behind me where it belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let me know which country or city you are in right now. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.